Good evening, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. As many of you know, we have David Hoffman, who will be joining us from the ADL today. David will be joining us about 7 o'clock in our service. That's usually where we run our sermon. He'll be talking a little bit about the Anti-Defamation League and the work that they do in addressing and confronting anti-Semitism across the country. Until then, we're going to proceed with our service. Our service will begin on page 2 of our Siddurim. Page 2 of our Siddurim. I'd like to invite up Eileen Kent for the Sabbath candle to be lit. For the Sabbath candles to be lit. Page 2.
Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the light of Shabbat.
Continue on page 8 of our Siddurim, page 8. I begin with a prayer of gratitude for all that is holy in my life. God needs no words, no English or Hebrew, no semantics and no services, but I need them. Through prayer I can sense my inner strength, my inner purpose, my inner joy, my capacity to love. As I reach upward in prayer, I sense these qualities in my Creator. To love God is to love each other, to work to make our lives better. To love God is to love the world God created and to work to perfect it. To love God is to love dreams of peace and joy that illuminate us all and to bring that vision to life. Continue on page 10 of our Siddurim. Hine ma tovu mana'im shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu mana'im shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu mana'im shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu mana'im shevet achim How good and how pleasant it is that brothers and sisters dwell together. We continue on page 28 with Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharei, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Almighty, Makadosh Baruch Hu. Ruchem Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Malachei Hamachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Ni L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Continue on page 28 with the Baruch Hu. Please rise. Praise Adonai, to whom praise is due forever. Praise be Adonai, to whom praise is due now and forever. Okay. You may be seated. We continue with the Shema prayer on page 34. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malachuto Leolam Vaed. Continue on page 36 with the V'ahavta. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha ub'chol nafshecha ub'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha chayom alevavecha v'shinantan levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shiticha b'veitecha uv'letecha v'aderech u'shachbecha uv'kumecha u'kshartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha u'ktavtam al mizuzot beitecha ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני Elohechem. Adonai Elohechem, and that. We continue on page 37, the translation for the V'ahavta. Love your God with every heartbeat, with every breath, with every conscious act. Keep in mind the words I command you today. Teach them to your children. Talk about them at work, whether you are tired or you are rested. Let them guide the work of your hands. Let them be at the forefront of your vision. Do not leave them at the doorway of your house or outside of your gate. They are reminders to do all of my mitzvot, so that I can be holy for you. I am Adonai, your God. I led you out of Egypt to become your God. I am Adonai, your God. We continue on page 39 with standing on the parted seas of history together with the English reading. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before we ever stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. We join together now for the Michamocha prayer on page 40. Mi chamocha ba'alim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, norat hilot osefele, norat hilot osefele, ma'alechutecha ra'u v'necha, bokeh al-yam lifnei Moshe Miriam, Ze'eli, Ze'eli, anu v'yamru, Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed, yadai, 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 We join together in English on page 43. Page 43. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up, waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, hapores sukat shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people, Israel, and over Jerusalem. Continue on page 44 with Vishamru. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. B'nei Yisrael oti le'olam, oti le'olam, oti le'olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Ki shet yamim asa Adonai Asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledoretam berit olam uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledoretam berit olam. We now rise for tefillah prayer. Tefillah begins on page 46. Adonai, Sefer Tiftach Ufida Yita Yiratecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu ve'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Hasadim Tovim, Ve'konei HaKol, Ve'zocher Chasdei Avot ve'imahot, U'mevii Geula libnei Bethlehem, Leman Shemo be'ahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magin, Baruch atah Adonai, Magid Avraham, ve'ezrat Sarah, atah gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh hakol atah rab le'Hoshia, Mashkiv haruach u'morid ha'gashem, Mechalkel chayim bechesed, Mechayeh hakol berachamim rabim, Somek noflim ve'rofei cholim, U'matir asurim, U'mechayeh me'emunato, Lishenei afar, Li kamocha ba'al gevurot, U'midom melach, Melech menit u'mechayeh, U'matzmiach Yeshua, Ve'ne'eman atah lehakayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh yishimcha kadosh u'kashim b'chol yom yehalelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. You are holy, your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. You may be seated. In just a moment. Just a moment. We'll wait for the ark to close first. We could play a game of Simon Says up here, Mark, yes. Now you may be seated. We turn to page 55 together with the English reading. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha-Shabbat. And now turn to page 58. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha u'hana'el lehodot. We'll join together for Shalom Rav on page 60. Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. Ki Atzah Melech Adon, Le'kol HaShalom. Ki Atzah Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. Tasim Le'olam. Tasim Le'olam. We now have a few moments of silent prayer and meditation. So just before we introduce David Hoffman from the Anti-Defamation League in just a moment, we will join together for Oseh Shalom, and then David will speak to us. Oseh Shalom is on page 62.
Oseh Shalom Biromam, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael.
Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahaseh shalom,
Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
All right, David, can you hear and see us? That answers that question. Can you hear us? I think that answers that question clearly. Let's see. David, can you hear us? No. I think that he is on mute right now. That much I can see. Can you hear us? David? Hello, David? Hi. Hi, you were on mute. You're watching us on YouTube? Okay. Hi. Okay. Okay. You can't hear us though? How about now? How about now? Can you hear us now? No? Okay. I know what he's saying, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give him a call on my phone, and we can communicate that way. Okay. 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 That sounds good. We can do that. Okay. We can do that. Yeah, we can turn up his volume. Hold on 1 second.
Good evening, everybody.
Whoa, 1 second, 1 second. Okay. I'm going to adjust the speakers. Can you go now? Okay, 1 second. Okay, I am trying to use 1 second.
Give me thumbs up. Next time you give me thumbs up, I'll get thumbs up.
Okay, sounds good. What I'm going to do is go into System Preferences and see if there is sound we can use. Let's turn off upload. Now I'll do one last thing, and that is make sure the connection is definitely in there. Okay. Can you hear us? Oh, if you can't hear us, do one last thing, and that is
You can hear me and see
yeah,
me.
we
I'm
definitely,
happy with that.
we definitely, yes.
All right.
Can you hear?
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat
My name's David Hoffman. I still can't hear you, but
We can
we'll
hear you.
make that work when the time comes. Probably if you want to use the chat to communicate with me, that should be fine. All right, great. Shabbat shalom. Thank you for inviting me into your community for the evening. My name is David Hoffman. I am Associate Regional Director for ADL Southeast. And before I start with this conversation, I do want to note that Colleyville was only 2 weeks ago, even though it feels like it was quite a long time ago. This situation is a painful reminder that synagogues in America continue to be at risk for terrorist attacks. And there's no doubt, given what we have learned, that the hostage taker chose his target carefully. The attack is a reminder that hardened conspiratorial anti-Semitism is a core tenet of extremists across the spectrum, from the far left to radical Islamists and everywhere in between. And while there's no direct pending threat on our community right now, the risks remain high in light of the historic level of anti-Semitism across the country and the proliferation of anti-Jewish hate online. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Before we go on, I just want to express my gratitude for our relationships with law enforcement at the local, state, and federal level, the Secure Communities Network, and our Jewish community organizations and leaders across the country, like Rabbi Bolan, as we fight anti-Semitism and all forms of hate. So tonight I'm going to give you just a very brief background of ADL to make sure we're all on the same page of what the work is that we do in our communities. We're going to look at some trends and examples of anti-Semitism today, and then how we can combat it as a community. And there will be time for questions at the end. So ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, was founded over 100 years ago by a group of Jewish community leaders who saw the rising tide of anti-Semitism and wanted to combat it, but recognized that it couldn't just be the Jewish community fighting anti-Semitism alone. Rather, it had to be Jews uniting with people from all backgrounds to fight all forms of hate. And so our mission since ADL's inception in 1913 has been to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure justice and fair treatment to all. As I said, I work for ADL Southeast. Our office is based in Atlanta, and we serve Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Today, ADL's work falls under three main buckets when it comes to our community involvement. The first is our advocacy and assistance work, where we're securing justice through the legislatures, courts, and the public square. From the grassroots level, we're engaged in school board meetings and on the ground community activities, all the way up to the federal level, where we lobby Congress and write amicus briefs for the Supreme Court. We also have a big piece of investigation and research work in our arsenal, where we respond locally to reports of hate-based incidents, and also have analysts and researchers at our Center on Extremism and the Center for Technology and Society who research and monitor national hate groups, what they're doing in person and what they're doing online. And then our last big piece of work is our education and training, where we are providing anti-bias educational programming for K-12 schools, on college campuses, in the workplace. We have programs for the Jewish community about recognizing and responding to anti-Semitism. We have our signature initiative, No Place for Hate, in over 200 public and private K-12 schools in the Southeast, where schools can sign on each year to implement programs to change the culture and climate of their school. And we also do a lot of work in the realm of Holocaust education, especially our Echoes and Reflections offerings with the USC Shoah Foundation and Yad Vashem. So that's a little bit of ADL's work in a nutshell. And as I mentioned in our investigation and research piece, we are responding to incidents of hate and bias, not just anti-Semitism, but anti-Semitism is certainly an area where we do focus. And we share our information that we gather about those incidents every year in our audit of anti-Semitic incidents. So even though it is now 2022, we are still processing the data from 2021. So all the information, or the trends that I'll show you, some of the examples will be from 2021, but a lot of the data that we will be seeing comes from 2020. And our 2021 audit should be coming out in April. So what I'm going to show you will probably not be surprising, but it will be upsetting. And what we see is over the past 4 years, we've seen the highest number of anti-Semitic incidents on record since we started collecting this data in the 70s. 2020 was the third highest year on record. You can see 2019 was higher. 1994 actually had just over 2,000 incidents too. But this stretch that we're in right now, starting in 2017, we have not seen anything like it in our time. Now, when we are tracking anti-Semitic incidents, we're not saying that every incident of anti-Semitism is criminal. When a child is made fun of in school or has pennies thrown at their feet, that is not a crime, but it would fall under our anti-Semitic incidents data. And so when we look at our incidents of anti-Semitism, we do like to see how does this compare with other forms of hate and hate towards other communities, because as I said at the beginning, we are not just fighting anti-Semitism, we're fighting anti-Semitism in all forms of hate. And so the best tracking that we can see that compares with our anti-Semitic incidents comes from the FBI, who releases their hate crimes data every year. Who is the target, where are they occurring, which law enforcement agencies are reporting it. And when we compare the FBI hate crimes data to our anti-Semitic incidents data, going all the way back to 2010, we see that the trend lines are almost identical. If you switch 2013 and 2014, and 2019 and 2020, it would be exactly the same curve. And so what that shows is that our research and the focus that we're doing on anti-Semitism mirrors the hate that is being targeted towards other groups as well. When we look at these incidents, we're not just checking a box saying, yes, that's anti-Semitic, no, that's not. We're also looking at deeper trends of what kinds of incidents are these and where are they occurring. And some of the trends that we see, again, make sense given the situations that we've been going through over the past couple of years. So when we look at the shift from 2019 to 2020, we see a decrease in assault, mostly because in 2020 people weren't gathering in person, so there were less incidents and opportunities for people to be physically attacked. But we did see a tremendous increase in anti-Semitic harassment. And that large increase, not exclusively, but does come as the result of a new form of harassment that we saw online through Zoom bombing, which is where haters, for lack of a better term, infiltrate a Zoom meeting or gathering and either annotate and mark on the screen, or share their screen, or put up a hateful profile pic, or unmute themselves and spew hateful messaging, or put hateful messaging in the chat. And this was something that we had never even imagined prior to March of 2020. But as soon as the world went virtual, we saw this attack, this form of attack, increase almost vertically. And so our colleagues at the Center on Technology and Society collaborated with Zoom leadership to sort of upgrade their security features so that communities could continue to gather safely as we all transitioned into this remote lifestyle. We are able to take a little look into what's been going on in the Southeast, again, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee. And we saw from 2019 to 2020 a little bit of an increase, not so much, but what we saw more strikingly was an increase in vandalism, which is particularly concerning because of the lasting impact that acts of vandalism can have on a community. We know that when a synagogue is to face, or a Holocaust memorial is to face, that many, many people can witness that and see it and be impacted by that one act, sometimes more than just a single incident of harassment or assault. Some of the examples that we've had over the past year plus in terms of anti-Semitic vandalism occurred at some of our region's Holocaust memorials. This was in Charleston, which is a Holocaust memorial in a public park right near Mother Emanuel Church, where you can see etched on this Holocaust memorial fake Jews, the so-called Negroes, or the real Jews of the Bible, and some other hateful messaging. In Nashville, at their Holocaust memorial, which is on their JCC's property, this group called the National Social Club sort of did the tour of Metro Nashville and posted this pre-painted sheet on the memorial, took a picture, as you can see, and then pulled it down and left and posted this on social media. I apologize, I should have said in advance that some of the messaging that we're gonna see is very disturbing. At ADL, we do believe that sunlight is the greatest disinfectant, and so as upsetting as it is to see, it's important to know what to look out for. So for example, the 14 and the crosshairs and the 88 underneath is code language that these organizations use to represent different messages. 88, for example, stands for the 8th letter of the alphabet, which is H. So 88 represents HH, which represents Heil Hitler. In both of these incidents, in Nashville and in Charleston, our Center on Extremism was able to sort of decode the messaging and see where these images were trending, and able to share information with our partners at the Jewish Federations and law enforcement to get a better sense of who was responsible and how to be prepared if something like this occurs again. We saw similar hateful graffiti on a synagogue in Huntsville, Alabama, over Passover. And what was actually really inspiring from this was that the next day, the entire community came out, Jewish and Christian, and painted over it together. In Georgia, when we look at the numbers, what is concerning to me is how few incidents are actually reported to us. Because when I do our education programs and I go to a synagogue or a youth group or anywhere I'm engaging with Jewish teens and ask how many of you have experienced anti-Semitism recently, 75% of them probably raised their hands. And yet, in 2020, we have 21 incidents reported to us across the state of Georgia, which it just doesn't add up for me based on the conversations I have. So we really believe that underreporting is real, and encourage members of the community to contact us when they see or experience something, and I'll share at the end how you can do that. We also take a look at where in the community do these incidents occur. And what you can see here is that more incidents of anti-Semitism occurred in public than anywhere else, which shows that when people see something, they are saying something, but like I showed you in Georgia, it's just not happening enough. And if you notice where the two fewest locations are, college campuses and K through 12 non-Jewish schools, I see a 1.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. So I'm going to pause and see if something comes in the chat.
Rabbi, does he think he's sharing?
Yeah, I'm asking.
You're nuts. Oh man, I forgot to share my screen. Well, thank you.
Okay.
And I'm embarrassed.
All right. That's fine.
All right, I'm going to go back a little bit.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
And just quickly show you some of the slides that I referred We can see it now, thumbs up.
Yeah, it's good.
Great. Here's the trend of anti-Semitic incidents that were reported to us. Again, 2019 saw the highest ever on record the past 4 years, more than any other 4-year stretch in our time of doing this. And here is the comparison between anti-Semitic incidents, both criminal and legal, that we report, and the FBI hate crimes, criminal incidents, targeting people from all different backgrounds. I'm going to pull up one more. I'm not going to go over I'm not going to show you the examples of incidents that I covered because they are really disparate. But we'll go back to where we left off, and if we have time at the end and you really do want to see more, I'm happy to show you. So again, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I apologize again. More incidents in public schools or public areas than anywhere else. The least number of incidents in college campuses and K-12 non-Jewish schools. Probably not surprising given that in 2020, students weren't on campus or in those schools. But what we are able to see, because we've been tracking this data for so long, is where things might have been had it not been for the pandemic. And what we can see here is that 2018 and 2019 saw much bigger numbers of anti-Semitism in schools than 2020. And when we look at the beginning of 2020, before we went virtual, draw your eyes to where the orange line is compared to the other two. Because the orange line is 2020 and the other two are 2018 and 2019. So had it not been for the pandemic, where we see the huge decrease of incidents in K-12 schools and college campuses in March of 2020, we can only imagine what that path would have looked like for anti-Semitism where students are had it not been for the pandemic. And unfortunately, what we've seen now that students are back on campus is incidents are happening again. This was at a school in Metro Atlanta, Hope High School, where swastikas were found in boys' bathroom, and a student was found coding a swastika in his class, their class, sorry. I don't know if it was, I don't know the gender of the student. So that's a little bit of what we are seeing in terms of anti-Semitism across the board. I want to now just do a quick dive into one of our education models to sort of say why it's important to counter this hate wherever and whenever we see it. The model that we use is called the pyramid of hate. The pyramid of hate here is intended not to show an hierarchy of hate, that genocide is the worst form of hate and biased attitudes are a good form of hate. You don't need a model and biased attitudes are not good. Rather, the intention of this model is to show how hate escalates if it's allowed to go unchecked. So if biased attitudes are allowed to exist in a community or a group of people, it allows for acts of bias to become tolerable. Jokes, bullying, slurs, dehumanization. And if enough of that is acceptable, then it can lead to systemic discrimination. And once people are discriminated against and separated, that can lead to the bias-motivated violence that we have seen in terms of vandalism and assaults and terrorism. And once that becomes normalized, that's when we see genocide. So we're not saying here that every biased attitude will lead to genocide, but I have yet to see an example of genocide that does not start with biased attitudes and acts of bias. And you can see how this pyramid plays it out just through the example of 2 weeks ago, where the the hostage taker, had this biased attitude. He believed in the stereotype that Jews have too much power. And I'll show you where we have information to dispel this myth. This attitude, though, wasn't just something that was thought, it was something that permeated plenty of areas of culture. As you can see here, we have cartoons that demonstrate that biased attitude of Jews controlling the world. And because these acts, this dehumanization and hateful language and images were allowed to persist, it led to the bias-motivated violence that we saw both in Colleyville and in Pittsburgh, where the shooter in Pittsburgh believed that that the Jews were responsible for the increase in immigration. And just to share a quick video that really brings this home. Give me one moment. This is a video from one of the hostages from Colleyville. Get it to play. Here we go.
He bought into these tropes. He was not your typical attacker who came in and I just want to kill all the Jews. That was not him. He came to the Jews because he bought into these very dangerous stories that the Jews control the world and the Jews control the government and the banks and the media. And we as good people and we as patriotic Americans, we need to challenge those things when we hear them. Because these words do have consequences. They play on people's ears, they play on people's fears, and it leads to actions like this, where people believe that if they want to accomplish a political act, terror to one group or another, and in this case to Jews, is not just capable, it'll be successful. He bought into these tropes. He was not your typical attacker who came in and...
So that really elucidates the parent motivation. He bought into these tropes that were heard and seen across the media that he took on, and it led to the actions. So now the question that we often get is, okay, if this is what we're seeing, how do we respond? We have a few different pieces that we recommend, but the general strategy that we say is to speak up, to share facts, and to show strength. So when you hear something that is hateful, we have a few different strategies that if we have more time I will dive into, but this is sort of a menu of options to keep in your pocket in terms of how to respond. We also, as I mentioned, need the community to let us know when something occurs. And on our website, ADL.org, there is a menu option to report an incident, again, not just anti-Semitic, but bias or hate in any form. And we also have new resources. We are really grateful to the URA for a new focus that we have with them, and have recently published a guide for responding to anti-Semitic incidents for Jewish communities. This is available on our website as well. So all that is how you can speak up in response. It is important to equip yourself with the facts and to share them when you have them. And we have a few different ways that you can do that. Again, online we have a tracker of anti-Semitic incidents, and Rebecca and I can send you some of these links afterwards to share out with your community. Here you can identify different acts of anti-Semitism, where they occurred, and sort of some examples. We also have a guide to anti-Semitic myths called Anti-Semitism Uncovered, where we dive into 7 of the most common myths, what their origins are, how they're manifested today, and how you can respond when you hear them or see them. And then also it goes into a little bit of history of anti-Semitism in America and around the world. We have a very interactive heat map. HEAT stands for Hate, Extremism, Anti-Semitism, and Terrorism, where you can look at different communities over different time periods and see sort of what examples of hate have they seen there. We also have plenty of educational resources that can be used for children, K through 12, and college students and beyond. Hate Uncycled is our resource for college campuses to prevent and prepare for incidents of bias, and then when they occur, how to respond and heal and educate the community. And Think, Plan, Act is our tool for dealing with anti-Semitism and anti-Israel issues off campus. And then for broader educational tools and strategies, we have different resources talking about bias and prejudice. The one on the left you can see is empowering young people in the aftermath of hate. This is extremely helpful, especially after incidents like in Collegeville. We have our Table Talks guide, which provides families and educators with conversation guides dealing with issues related to ADL's work that we're seeing in the media. We have a team of education specialists across the country who are developing these resources as needed. And we also have lesson plans for educators. Again, some on anti-Semitism, others on broader aspects of hate and bias as well. So that is sort of what I have to share with you tonight. I do want to open it up for questions, and if there is something that I covered earlier, again, apologize for not sharing the screen sooner. If there's something that you want to see that I didn't show you, happy to do that.
David, can you hear us now or no?
Still
Can't. Okay, so I'm gonna have to use the chat. All right. So, who would like to ask the first question? Go ahead, Rick.
And I talked to you about this.
Yes.
I want to make sure that I didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
Where
The presentation.
Where the ADL reported that Jews make up 50% of all hate crimes in the United States.
Yeah. So that was earlier into the presentation. I'll ask
Sorry, I
David.
missed that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Apparently I missed that part.
Earlier in the presentation, there was it was cited. I don't think that it was actually we could actually see it because we didn't see the early part of the presentation. But I'm just going to ask David if you can provide me. If you could provide the presentation for us.
I need to look and see. The question is, can I provide the presentation to you? I need to look and see if there's any pieces of it that are
Copyright.
a little too proprietary. I don't think that's the case, but I'm not going to say yes before going back and checking. A lot of the trends that I shared were from our audit of anti-Semitic incidents, and that is accessible online.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions? Go ahead, Anya.
To what extent might the ADL coordinate with CARE and NAACP, and if they work jointly together?
I can check.
Do they share information?
While Rabbi Goldman's typing, I do want to say how excited I am to eventually come to Columbus.
Yes.
Really?
We are on the verge of emerging out of this virtual landscape at ADL. We're not exactly there yet, but the time will come where we do make our way to person and this opportunity. To what extent does the ADL share information with the NAACP and other organizations? It's a great question. And I'll say that one of the pieces that I touched on very briefly, but we'll sometimes do a deeper dive into, is our advocacy work, where one of the biggest wins that we've had recently was getting hate crime legislation passed in Georgia. Georgia, prior to the summer of 2020, had been one of 5 states that did not have a statewide hate crime law on the books. ADL has led that charge at the state and federal level across the country, and we were proud to lead a coalition of 30 other organizations across Georgia, Jewish and not Jewish, to show that it doesn't matter what community you're part of, hate impacts us all, and the NAACP was one of our most steadfast partners in that, in those efforts. We have a really strong relationship with them at the state and national level. They, I would say, do not do as much investigative work as we do, but they are tremendous advocates, not just for the African American community, but incredible allies for the Jewish community as well. So we see them as great friends. That being said, I'm not going to say that there are never disagreements between nonprofit community serving organizations, but we totally respect where each other comes from, and find strength in the commonalities that we share.
So, go ahead.
When you find these incidences of anti-Semitism, are you able to trace, like in a town or a city, are you able to trace what?
And I will say, as another question is being typed, that when an incident of racism, for example, occurs in our community, we will reach out to them and ask them, are you responding? How can we support you? Do you want us to what can we do to support your community? We do the same thing with LGBTQ plus community when there's an issue of homophobia or transphobia. Same thing with any targeted community that has representation at an organizational level like that.
Go ahead, Sybil, sorry.
No, I kind of missed it because
Tracing incidents of hate.
What I wanted to know was when you find these incidences, can you trace it back to one thing or
One person, you mean?
no, just one event or one person or group? Or
Okay.
what have you learned about what stimulates that reaction?
I appreciate the time that it's taking to translate these questions. No question, it's too challenging for me. So putting that out there as I take this next one. When incidents occur, can you trace to individuals or organizations? Depends on the incident. Sometimes yes. So for example, and now I will go back to share. I'll share my screen to show you some of the incidents that I was referring to. Because there are some where there is a calling card, and others where there isn't. So, for example, I'm going to go back to the incidents of vandalism. This was on the Charleston Holocaust Memorial. There really isn't much there except for some language. It says the so-called Negroes are the real Jews of the Bible. Fake Jews, wake up Israel, and then parentheses Negroes. And so while we might not know who exactly are the culprits of this, because of the research that we do into the hate groups of all backgrounds, we are able to identify the ideology that may be associated with it, and then law enforcement or people who are more closely integrated into the community can maybe connect or identify the connections with groups that may have those ideologies. In other cases, And again, this is one where it's upsetting imagery, but English go-to. This is something that we saw posted online by an organization called the Nationalist Social Club. And what we were able to do was sort of track their travels across Metro Nashville and see all the different places where they took action like this. And so we were able to sort of build a file of their activity. And this is what I mentioned earlier, the numbers and the symbols underneath are things that we are able to decode. We have a hate symbols database that is accessible to the public online, but would sort of help anyone who sees graffiti or vandalism and isn't sure what it means can look online and see if it is something that has a deeper meaning they recognize. So 14 represents a 14-word slogan used by white supremacists. I explained briefly what 88 stands for. The crosshairs in the middle is actually a symbol called the Celtic cross that is used by hate groups. And we have enough time for one last question.
One last question. Go ahead.
Does the ADL cooperate with any international organizations to track the global rise of anti-Semitism?
Okay.
As the question is typed again, I sincerely apologize and embarrassed about the technical malfunctions, but we're going to get through this, and I appreciate the interest and the really important questions that y'all have been asking. Does ADL track international trends on anti-Semitism? We have an entire international affairs department. We have an office in Jerusalem. We have colleagues in Europe. It is a smaller office compared to the work that we do in America, but we are monitoring and responding to hate in Israel and targeting Jews in other countries. One of the things that I think is most interesting that we do in terms of international affairs, I think there are two actually, is when the UN General Assembly occurs every year in New York. Traditionally, we set up meetings with foreign delegations to talk through hate and extremism in all forms, no matter who it's targeting. Because again, we know that the hate that's present in a community isn't just targeting Jews, and if it's not targeting Jews yet, it probably will. We also have a lot of research on anti-Semitism in foreign textbooks, which is incredibly disturbing and incredibly fascinating. So I can give you some of that information as well. I see the thumbs up, so I wish that I could hear from you, but I just want to say, Rabbi Cohen, thank you so much for continuing to engage with us in these conversations, and we are here to be of service to your community and a partner to your congregation. And I really do look forward to engaging more in person. So, thank you again. Shabbat Shalom. Please reach out.
All right.
Rabbi, real quickly, there was
Yes.
one thing I wish that we had time to get into. Did you notice that the word mouse?
Yes, mouse has just recently been banned.
Yes.
And Holocaust education is something that is going state by state as a requirement, and unfortunately there are states pushing back, and part of their pushback includes curriculums being denied actually access to requirement as reading, and it's been banned in, I think it's Tennessee now, which is very disturbing. So, in just a moment, we'll turn back to our Siddurim. And we'll be offering a Mishaberach at this time on page 253. page 253. Our Misha Baraks for this evening include the following names. Once the names have been read aloud, I'd invite anyone from our congregation to please share with us any names of any individuals that they would like added to our Misha Barak list. For this evening, the names are included with the following: Sylvia Bernard, Marion Bahar, Ashley Blair, Joyce Cahill, Harav Shmuel ben Kahat Vikrambo, Chanashira Bat Yisrael Lefega, Marty Foster, Silly Hellman, Barbara Kiven, Don Kramer, Odessa Marie Lee, Maria Lopez, Lexi McRae, Fran Morton, Pam Ortez, Harold Osborne, Jonathan Peretz, Miguel Poniman, Vivian Poniman, Avery Ray, Colton Robinson, Maxine Schiffman, Rabbi Beth L. Shorts, Doris Spires, Linwood Spires, Steve Watson, Amy Webb, Ashley Watena. Are there any additional name requests for anyone in our congregation? Eric? Betty Horiochi. Stewart? Dr. Jefferson Jones. Ryan Wilkes. Barbara Owens. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Words to the Misha Barak can be found on page 253. In just a moment, we'll be turning to the Kaddish prayer, but first we have a short meditation on page 285. Page 285. Let the time not be distant, O God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when superstition shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. O may all created in your image become one spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your realm be established on earth, and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever. Page 288. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not in your mind. You can love me best by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die, people do. So when all that is left of me is love, give me away. The Kaddish prayer can be found on page 294. Page 294. I'll be reciting the names that have been provided to me from our Yortzeit list, and if there is anyone who would like to add any additional names to the Yortzeit list, please include those names so that we as one community can pray for your loved one who may have perished as of recent years, months, or even days. Recently deceased are Ruth Kravkin. Our yard sites for today continue with the following names: Edna Brown Stern, Faye Shapiro, Hilla Kent, Jeanette Jensen, Sarah Jane Harrison, Bernard Rothschild, Sarah Evelyn Stein, Peggy Ann Levy Hecht. Are there any additional name requests from anyone in our congregation this evening? Okay. Please rise if it is your custom for the Kaddish prayer on page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shamei rabbah, bi'alma divra hirute v'yamlich machute, v'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye decho beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam olamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudusha berechu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'el kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imramav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'el kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May their memories always be for a blessing, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated. So for our blessing over the wine, I'd like to invite up Jacqueline Waldman and Sarah Burke. The blessing over the wine may be found on page 5 of our Siddurim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzav banu, v'shabbat kadosho v'ahava v'ratzon hinchin lanu, Zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom tehila l'mikra'e kodesh, zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim. Ki banu v'acharta, v'yotanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodecha, v'ahava uvratzon, hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh ha-shabbat. Amen.
And now we will have the blessing of the challah as well. Shukayach. Very good.
Thank you.
Would you like some or no? Okay. All right. Blessing over the bread.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Very good. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. Wishing everyone Shabbat Shalom. I'm glad everyone showed up and were able to hear our guest speaker this evening. I think it was a very educational opportunity, and we can schmooze about it a little bit more outside with the oneg. So wishing everyone Shabbat Shalom.